The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. This is DP Solutions webinar, Coronavirus and Your Technology, Adapting Your IT in a Time of Crisis. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. As you can see, I'm Jill Rose, and we've got Ben Schmerler with us as well.
Hello.
We are doing this from our homes, as I'm sure most of you are, or all of you are. So welcome to the webinar. Going to give everybody just a few minutes to log in. So, hi, Katha, Mindy, hi, Steve, Tim, Bill. Who else we got? Jessica, Daniel, Dree. Hey, everybody, welcome. All right.
Good to have you all here.
Hope everybody is staying safe and staying inside for the most part. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. I know we have a lot of questions today. So, as I said, this is our webinar, Coronavirus and Your Technology, Adapting Your IT in a Time of Crisis. My name is Jill Rose. I'm the moderator and webinar organizer today. Just a few housekeeping tips as always. We have placed everyone on mute just to cut down on any background noise. But if you have a question, there's a question box you can use. We'll certainly read that out loud. Or you can raise your hand and we'll unmute your line. Ben, I'm going to kick it off to him to just kind of run through how today's going to go. And with that, I'm going to kick it off to Ben Schmerler.
And then ask for questions as we go through, try and focus on things that people are caring about, things that are in the news, trending, etc. But this time, we did it sort of the opposite way. We said, now is a really uncertain time. Send us your questions. What are the things you're concerned about? And we'll take everything you got and see what we can do to answer them. And we got a lot of questions, a lot more than I expected, which is great news. So the last week or so, I've been doing my homework, trying to get the answers that are needed that I didn't know, or talk to some of my peers or people in the community to get those answers. And the way we did this is we put them into 4 categories just for the sake of organization. Jill's going to go through, as we go through the slide next, she's going to ask me questions. I took pages and pages and pages of notes for you guys so that I would have a pretty decent response. We want to get through as many as we can. If I'm not touching on a subject well enough or you have follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to chat with us. If necessary, we can have follow-ups offline, or if we have more time, we can get to them at the end of the slide deck. But I'm not going anywhere, so we're going to get through as much as we can right now. So without further ado, Jill, why don't you start us off?
Okay, so our first question is around collaboration tools. Mm-hmm. Is there a risk that OSC...
And we got the most questions on those, I think.
We did, yes. Okay, is there a risk that OSC and video conferencing apps will become overloaded? And if so, is there a recommendation for having multiple apps without the expense?
Yeah. It's a good question. So there's evidence right now. I mean, things have been pretty stable. As you can see, right now we're on GoToMeeting and things are working pretty well. Internally at DP Solutions, we've been using Microsoft Teams a lot. I'm going to talk about Teams a whole bunch today. And we've been pretty seamless. I remember on Monday the 16th, you saw Europe have a big push into the Microsoft ecosystem that morning. I think at that time, a lot of these countries started sort of moving their staff remotely, and there was a little bit of a blip there. And Microsoft reported recently something like 775% higher usage of their cloud services recently. But on the positive side, things feel pretty stable. The things I'm reading about mostly are you might see quality differences in the video, like perhaps the video is scaled down to a lower resolution. So things maybe are not quite as crisp, but still functional. I've heard about things, speaking about the internet more broadly, things like network throttling for things like Netflix and such. And you can expect that, but in general, one thing I wanted to say when it comes to this stuff is, even though a lot of us are working remotely and we're using our home connections, if you were using cloud services before, teleconferencing, collaboration tools, etc., especially if they were in the cloud and you're doing them for your office, you're already utilizing a lot of this cloud stuff. It's just a different place you're utilizing it from. So fortunately, things have been pretty stable. I can't say things are 100% as they were, but things have been pretty good. As far as backup solutions for collaboration, I think it's hard to justify the expense of doing that right now, given the pretty decent uptime that's been there. I do think, most of us have personal accounts they use for collaboration stuff. I know I have a personal Google account that I can use for Hangouts. And actually, spoiler alert, we're going to do another video, like a recorded video soon, which I use, I use some other personal tools so I can record a video since we don't have our studio space. And not just that, many of these other commercial products have free versions. Teams has the free demo for a time being, if you're not already using that, Microsoft Teams. So I think, I definitely think things have been stable. If I was to have a backup, it would be something very simple, something very low cost. Your cell phone, FaceTime, your personal Google account if you want to use Hangouts, stuff like that. I wouldn't go overboard with that at this time.
And Ben,
So,
can you clarify what is
sorry,
OSC? I'm sorry, can you clarify what is OSC?
So I'm not 100% sure, and I want to be clear. I took the questions, or we took the questions, we put this together exactly verbatim. My understanding of OSC is open source collaboration or open side collaboration. I might not have gotten that acronym correct. So because there's a few things that are called OSC, you Google it. If I didn't get your answer, questioner, please make sure to comment, and I'm happy to elaborate.
Okay, great. All right, next question. Are there any programs or apps to help reduce background noise or interference?
Awesome question. So there are a few things that we can do for the background noise and things like that. So Microsoft Teams, for example, has a blur background feature. I don't believe it's in GoToMeeting right now, but you could literally, like right now, you see my stuff behind me. I could blur all that out with Microsoft Teams, so you just see my face and my shirt and all that stuff. My big recommendation, if you are like you have kids around or a dog that's barking or something like that, either if you have a nice mic in your microphone settings, you should have something called a noise gate that you can work with. And a noise gate basically says once the volume reaches a certain decibel level, then the mic picks it up and records it. But until then, it doesn't pick it up at all. And so if I was on a call and I had a noise gate on and I'm typing on my keyboard and making clicky clack noises, those clicky clack noises won't come through, but my voice will because it passes a decibel threshold. It depends on the mic, depends on the drivers of the computer. It might be a little tricky to set up. If you have a personal situation, again, getting back to the personal area, if you have a personal situation you want to talk about, we probably have to tailor it to you. I would look for the noise gate and device settings first, and then look at what is within the application itself.
Okay, great.
So there are some things. Yeah.
Okay. Best practices on conference calls specifically related to increased demands, seeing as the entire workforce is working from home.
Great. This is a great question. So I look at this as really a workflow and usage thing. The first thing, and I can't tell you, I mean, I do a lot of calls and conferences, and so everybody should really be muted unless they're called on or ready to speak. I know everyone's been on the call where everyone connects and you hear a million echoes and noises and stuff like that. Really starting off with the thing muted and then letting people in to talk is really important. I also think it's important to have a leader of this stuff to sort of keep the conversation organized. It's not that people are trying to be rude or anything. It's more like we want someone to lead the way on that stuff. And so have a leader there. Have an agenda, have a structure for your calls meetings. A lot of people like to have this informal wing it stuff, but the reality is when you don't have, physical dynamics of people together and you have to hold each other accountable, it can be hard to establish control. Another thing I like to do is when there's a call, I like to use headphones like you see right now. Like I'm not using my computer speakers, I'm using my headphones. And the reason I'm doing that is that any audio, like if Jill started talking or if someone else started talking, I could put that in my microphone right now. And so I like using headphones, even earbuds, anything you can use at all to avoid that noise is really, really important. But it's really important, I think, right now to think about structure and organization and being, the side of this.
Okay, great. All right, our next question is, what is involved in making electronic conferencing available, including security risks to law firm databases and file servers?
All right, give me a second. I want to go to my notes on that one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, this one seems to be specific to law firms, but I imagine anyone with compliance and lots of documents could relate to this.
Yeah, so just this morning, I was reading, and I shared this on LinkedIn, and we'll probably do some more write-ups on this. Zoom got criticized by a lot of security people for not really having true end-to-end encryption, not properly secure case with webcam. So with a Mac, you could root through the webcam to get access to the machine because of a flaw with Zoom. So that's really not very good. So we have to be careful about what product we're using. So for example, as it pertains to Zoom, like I think Teams is a more secure environment than Zoom because it's so much more controlled. I mean, Zoom's so open. Another thing we have to keep in mind is the environment that we are doing electronic conferencing. We can't have any kind of eavesdropping when this kind of person-to-person conferencing, even with someone at someone's home. In terms of making the conferencing available, getting it technically working, it's really not very difficult. I mean, you could have a very basic solution, like think even Google Hangouts. Now, granted, a webcam and a microphone on someone's computer might not have the greatest fidelity. Like obviously, you're looking at me right now, and this isn't 4K, 60 frames per second clean HDR video, but it's okay. But when you're talking about electronic conferencing, when it comes to things like depositions, you might need a better webcam. You might need a better quality mic. Once you have that, using a good tool like maybe a Google Hangouts that you use multi-factor authentication to get into, and then using a personal VPN so that communication between you and the recipient is encrypted end to end is really a good idea. There are a lot of tools that can do it. And fortunately, especially when it comes to law firm stuff, the bar has been lowered so much to do these things. Most of the products do have end-to-end encryption, and Zoom is now a little skeptical, but most of these products do offer it. You just want to find the right one and a few consumer level pieces of hardware, and you can usually get it done. Things you can get on Amazon today.
Okay, great. All right. How can we better connect and share sensitive information amongst our team during this time?
Another great question. So the first thing I would talk about is bear with me, I'm just going to my notes because I took a lot of them on this question. All right, connect and share sensitive information. So first, we have to define sensitive information, okay? So we're an office, we do a certain kind of sensitive work. Everybody in the organization, no matter where they work, has to understand what a sensitive piece of data is. And it's not surprising that most organizations don't have those policies documented. I was talking with someone the other day, and their employees act responsibly with sensitive data, but they got a security assessment done, and they said, well, where's your policy? Where's your documentation? If someone came in, how would they know what sensitive data is? So first of all, we have to define that. And along with that, we have to define what are the channels and tools we use to share that data. So people can't go rogue on this stuff. When Jill and I are working, and we're doing a lot of, as you can tell, we're doing a lot of collaboration together right now, we use our company Teams accounts, and we're sharing things over our company SharePoint, and we're using all the security and multi-factor and all that stuff to make sure that the communications between Jill and I is private. Now, granted, when we're collaborating on slide decks, this is not exactly the most sensitive information that we're sharing right now, but it is at least between us. At least we know that it's reasonably secure. You have to take measures like that. So define the data that has to be sensitive, define the products and services that you're allowed to use to do it, make sure you have an inventory of who is getting into those things and how. Think about the devices that people are using. So if they're using home devices or personal mobile devices, make sure that we have the proper security tools like patch management, mobile device management, antivirus, maybe a personal VPN, et cetera, to make sure that those things are good. And then that's pretty much what you can do right now, especially if you're in a mode, which some people are, of sort of adapting to the COVID-19 situation as opposed to using existing things if you're reacting a little bit.
Okay, great. Courts continue to direct discovery continue. What is available for sorting documents to be produced?
All right, so full disclosure, I had to do a little research on lawyering. I wanted to keep this verbatim. Maybe there might have been a typo or something in here. I'm not totally sure. I wanted to keep it in verbatim because I didn't want to assume anything. So my understanding after talking to real life lawyers about this question is that when we're doing discovery, we're not talking about me sharing a PowerPoint with Jill, one single document. We're talking about potentially thousands and thousands of pages of documents, maybe in different formats, maybe PDFs, maybe images. I'm not really sure. And you're often talking about two different parties, right? Perhaps a plaintiff firm and a defense firm or something like that. And again, pardon me, I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to, I'm trying to sound my best on this here, but the challenge is we're trying to send a lot of stuff that could be sensitive, and we're trying to send it to a party where we don't know what's on the other end. We don't know what devices they're using, what platforms they're using, how they're connecting to it, et cetera. My advice is to use web-based tools. So one example, I believe, is WeTransfer, and we can do a little research on it, but we want to use tools that allow mass amounts of data to be securely sent over a long area. The problem with encrypted email, which I know a lot of times is useful and the right choice for sharing this kind of stuff, is that we might have a volume problem. There might be too many files to share over an encrypted email when we're talking about discovery. So WeTransfer is good because I think you can do 2 gigabytes or something, which for a big amount of documents might be sufficient. There are other services that are even higher. Other services that are out there, I know, for example, services like Dropbox, if you get some of the higher end services that have the compliance and security that you need on it, we'll have things like folder sharing. So you could create on Dropbox or something, or similar services. I don't want this to be entirely about Dropbox, but you can maybe create a case folder. And under that case folder, you have all the files that you want to share for discovery, and then you share a link to that folder. So then someone connects to your cloud assets and they pull down the data that they want, rather than you just transfer a whole bunch of stuff to them. That think of it like everybody goes and visits the post office to get their mail, rather than you just send a big envelope of stuff straight to their door. That's how I would approach it. It's going to be a little challenging though, because we want to use products and services that are kind of platform agnostic, things that are web-based. Because if it's web-based, it'll be able to be used on a Mac or a PC or an Android tablet or whatever. That's a really important step right now. But we want to make sure it has encryption and compliance as a part of it. These companies right now are very eager to talk with people. They are seeing a lot of interest. So again, if you have a specific situation you want to talk about, we can follow up on this offline and get into your specific situation, so I can really tailor that answer to you.
Okay, perfect. How to collaborate better as a team with technology?
There's a lot of ways. I always start with the tech part and speak about, taking the tech out of it and speak about the workflow. So think about the things, if you were in the office, that would make you successful. What's your business? What are the key tasks to accomplish? For DPS, this isn't a difficult question for us. We're a technology company. Our job is making our clients up, keeping their data secure, making sure they have access, so on and so forth. We're just doing these things remotely. So for us, we're able to pivot fairly easily, as easily as it could be. I know for other businesses that might be a challenge. So if you consider certain industries like hospitality or travel, it may not even be possible. So anyway, the first thing is you really have to have good software in place. that everyone agrees about. I've talked about it a lot. I use Microsoft Teams. And the reason I like Microsoft Teams is I can share files with individuals. We can collaborate on those documents together. So if Jill and I wanted to work at the same time on a PowerPoint and make our edits together, we can do that with basically the 365 suite. I could do a screen share, I could do a video chat, I can do audio chat. This is a really nice feature, and it integrates well with everything else we do. It's not the only tool out there. Slack is out there, that's free. There is a free version that might be good for you, at least as a way to dip your toes in. But then there's another part of this, which is management. So if we expect the technology to do all the work for us to make our team collaborate well, we're going to have a failure. So some of the things we do that I think is really important is we do daily check-in calls with our teams, management huddles, things like that. We require, like, for example, if I decided I needed to brave the outside and go to the grocery store to get something in the middle of the day, I send a note to the team, hey, I'm stepping out for 20 minutes or whatever, and this is what I'm doing. It's not that we have to micromanage people, but we should have a sense of where people are going and what they're doing. I think even having the video chat part can be good, if only because having a face on it, I think, tends to raise the energy up. I'm not going to say everyone has to use video, but I think it can help. But I think the communication is really key. We can't expect the tech to do it all for us. We have to be engaged and present.
Right. All right, moving along. We combined these two questions because they were similar, but what are some suggested teleconference technology besides Microsoft Teams? And what are the best apps available for live meetings with clients?
Right. Give me a sec. There are a ton. I mentioned Google Hangouts before. You know, the beauty is that's easy to access. You just need a Google account. I mentioned Zoom. So I'm not saying stop using Zoom in light of these security concerns. If you just want to have a chat with your team about something that's not sensitive, I don't see any risk of using Zoom necessarily. But I'm not really liking some of the stuff I read about the company recently and their attitude about security. And when I say attitude about security, you know, pushing your platform as a secure platform and boasting about your encryption and then having these flaws is really disconcerting for me. And maybe that's my personal bias, but it doesn't make me feel good about using Zoom, the news for the last couple of days. Now, again, I'm not going to say don't use it entirely, but we just be careful. I wouldn't have a really serious, sensitive conversation on Zoom right now. Slack is out there, GoToMeeting, which we're using now. Even FaceTime with your phone or Facebook Messenger can be okay if you just want to have a simple chat. A lot of it's going to be dependent on how many people you have, what devices they have access to, what kind of meetings you want to have, whether it's internal or external, and so on. Teams is really good internally, but you can share it with others externally with certain subscriptions. Google Hangouts is good because all you really need is the Google account. And so, you know, if people only have personal accounts, well, we can do a Google Hangouts thing. That's fine. The answer is going to vary, but those are just a few examples.
All right, great. Using Zoom versus Teams. We have Teams. Oopsies, clicked out of the wrong thing. Using Zoom versus Teams, we have Teams through our O365 license. Is there a way to view more than 4 members of the video at a time? I know Zoom, you can see all participants.
Yeah, so I actually did a little homework on this. So apparently Microsoft is planning on doing 3x3. So you could have like the kind of, you can call it the Brady Bunch look, if you will, of like the way the cameras are organized. Microsoft has that on their release schedule, and it was supposed to have come already, but it hasn't, and I'm not sure why. So supposedly that's coming to Teams. Zoom, you can see all participants. That's true. It's probably better right now for the specific feature of viewing more people. But as I mentioned, in light of some of the security concerns, I don't necessarily love using it. And you know, even with Teams, even if you only have 4 videos at a time, you can use the feature where the person talking is the one that gets featured on the camera. So maybe you don't view them all at the same time, but you can see the person who's relevant at the time. So you can see all participants with Zoom, but 360. But I think Teams is a better product, to be honest. That's just again, maybe it's my bias, but I'm a little concerned about the security stuff.
Absolutely. What are some tips for using RDP, which is Remote Desktop Protocol, if I'm correct?
Sure.
Issue of screen resolution, pixelated text, and dealing with cursor lag, PDF slowness issues.
Yeah. So we'll talk in general about the remote desktop experience. Now, RDP is a Microsoft Terminal Server term, but you could apply that to Citrix or perhaps like TeamViewer or some of these other products that allow you to remotely control a device. So, what are the optimal settings, and what are the ways to work with it? So, some of this is going to be limited based on what you're remoting into. So, for example, if you own a physical terminal server or Citrix server, maybe it's in a closet in your office, there are going to be constraints on accessing that based on how much RAM it has, how much internet speed you have coming into the office, the type of work you're doing. Internet traffic levels, I mentioned the bandwidth's up, maybe things might be getting throttled a little bit, and so on. So there's going to be some limitations. Not just that, I want to point out that certain things as a remote desktop experience are maybe not the best. There's a reason video editors don't often do their work over remote desktop. There's a reason why animators don't do their work over remote desktop. It's just not that fine-tuned experience that you have when you have everything processing on the local machine. These are edge cases, of course. For most people doing their email or writing a document or accessing a CRM, RDP is totally fine. I also asked one of my colleagues, Martin Hanks, a really knowledgeable guy. I've worked with him for years, and he gave me a couple tips specific to RDP that I thought might help. So one thing he mentioned is in the experience, for the experience tab, he usually lets Windows define the speed of the connection, unless I know it's a slow link, and then I'll set it up accordingly. So what he's saying essentially is Windows will automatically detect how fast your connection is and adjust the quality of it. But if let's say for the sake of argument, you're like, you know what, I live in a rural area, my internet speed's really bad because I just have old DSL or something, maybe not the case for most people on the call, but let's say you're in that situation. You can define the speed of the connection much lower and force that slower speed, so it won't try to push things and maybe have a worse experience it's trying to give you the best quality, but at the cost of the best experience. The other thing he turns on, Martin mentioned, is persistent bitmap caching and reconnect on connection loss. Now, for you, if you're having any of these difficulties with RDP, I would really recommend at least putting a service ticket in with us so we can at least see and give you some feedback on it. It is very possible, as I mentioned, that there's going to be some constraints here. If you're using this from an internet connection that's slow at your house, there's only so much we can do. If your terminal server you're remoting into is really old, there's only so much we can do. This is really one of the reasons why utilizing cloud services like Windows Virtual Desktop or Azure or Office 365 or some of the Microsoft suites in the cloud are really good because they're agile. As you need more from it, it can scale up for you, even in a time like now where resources are being pushed a little bit. A lot easier to get it in the cloud than it is to get an extra 32 gigs of RAM for your terminal server, and getting that done. That's pretty tricky in general. It's not tricky, but it takes more consideration. So anyway.
Okay. Yeah. I think this next question about the optimal settings for RDP edit under Experience tab, you kind of answered that already.
Yeah.
So I'm going to skip to the next one. Okay, so we're moving into the management section of things. What changes do you expect to see in the management of telework platforms?
Another great question. So I think now that I think we've gone past the point of functionality. Most people, when you're talking about things like remoting into stuff or doing a video call or sharing a doc or whatever, the function is there. Maybe there's more to work around the edges to make it more seamless in terms of like have it as an in-office experience. So where I expect things to go, especially in light of this Zoom stuff, is I expect to be a bigger push and differentiation on security. because a lot of these people who are going to move into this telework stuff are going to be people with serious compliance issues. Just think about PCI. And so with PCI a couple years ago, they said for remote desktop connections, they were requiring multi-factor authentication. And and for some PCI clients, that was a big deal because that's how they were working. Now, all of those clients are now working remotely. Now, all of them have to do this different level of security, and they're using these telework platforms. So I expect more pushes for things like multi-factor authentication and security and compliance as a part of it. I think these platforms that are lax on security are going to get scrutinized a lot. I think they are going to be targets for attack as the hackers follow the trends and they see that people are working remotely. I expect them to be pushing on that. So I expect there to be a major push of security. The other piece I would expect more focus on is mobility and device agnosticism. Again, already pretty good, but we really are moving to this BYOD, bring your own device environment where people can use and act with whatever they want. And I would expect there to be more stuff with that.
Yep, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what are best practices for monitoring the productivity of teams and individuals?
Yeah. This is a very challenging right now. I think the focus really has to be more on productivity as opposed to monitoring behavior. People in their homes are going to be all over the place. Their kids are there, their animals are there, all that stuff. Right now, you might be able to hear my cat meowing for me outside of my office door. But the focus really has to be more on the productivity side. The best thing, I talked about this a little earlier, is to have check-ins. Require people to check in with you. Talk, 5 minutes about what they got going on with their day, or send a status update or something like that. You can't look at normal things like, well, where did they browse on the internet, or were they watching Netflix while they were working or something like that? To be perfectly honest, we have no control over that right now, and people are going to do what they're going to do. So it's more important that we say, well, what are people doing with their time? What can I look at from the start of the day to the end of the day and see what they did to get things done, to be more productive? Another tip I've heard is, and I mentioned this a little earlier, is to use the video feature on if you're going to have like a long conference or a meeting and you're concerned about engagement. Like if you want to make sure, let's say you want to have a meeting for 20 people and you're going over a training thing or whatever, and you're worried that people are just going to turn it on and then walk away for an hour. Make them turn on their camera, if they can. We don't want to be too judgmental, don't judge people on their workspaces or if they're wearing a sweatshirt or something like that. I mean, this isn't a normal time. I don't think we should be judgmental about this stuff. Another thing that I would recommend, I've been seeing a lot, is doing cultural things to make people feel more engaged and want to engage more. So doing maybe a virtual coffee in the morning. If you're going to do your check-in, why don't you do your check-in at 8:30 or 9 and everyone has their cup of coffee? Like, what kind of coffee you having? And blah, blah, blah. And where'd you order that? Oh, you got this from Amazon? Well, I'll order this kind of coffee next time, or a virtual happy hour maybe at the end of the week to people to unwind and vent and talk about the challenges that they've had this week, or create positivity and stuff like that. You don't even necessarily have to be directly productive with this stuff. I think having the cultural engagement will make people want to work and be productive. People are home, they're bored sometimes, and I think people. I know for myself, I want to do things. It makes the days go by. It makes me feel happier. So I would recommend things like that. It's obviously a major challenge right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thanks, Ben. Support availability.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly what this question was going at. So I'm just going to speak in general about DPS's support availability. Our support, I'll just be totally transparent about what things look like. So when Governor Hogan announced that the schools were closing, as you might expect, we saw this ratchet up of people asking for remote access requests, and that was not typical. Having hundreds of tickets come in, more than what you're expecting on remote access all at once because of things beyond your control. And obviously we had to move resources around, but I think we handled it pretty well as you could, given a very sudden demand. I think another thing that's helped us provide support is we really have been in an environment for us where people have been able to work wherever for quite some time from a technology perspective. Speaking for myself, I have my laptop here. I'm in my home. I can really do whatever I need to do aside from personal in-person meetings with clients. There isn't a whole lot I can't do in my home that I couldn't do in my office, and that's great. So that's helped us. I think that's helped us respond to our clients. As you might expect, we're limiting on-site visits as much as possible. Not obviously completely off limits, but certainly not as it used to be. I would as anyone would expect, if you really need to send someone on site, you just send someone on site. You wouldn't even think twice about it. Now we have to think twice about it. I'm sure you all understand. We're monitoring productivity levels of people and trying to move resources around. During our weekly meetings, we are looking at the ticket levels, et cetera, where people can be the most useful. Obviously, we have our departments and the way we're organized as a company, but we're not trying to be too dogmatic to that, because if we were, we might not give our clients the best experience during an unprecedented time. So I think things have been pretty good. I think you would, and speaking about support availability on the broader technology level, other vendors, Microsoft, maybe HP or whoever, hardware vendors, it's going to be different across the board. And we've seen some be really good and then some be difficult to reach. And I think that over time we'll get more normal, but that's where things stand right now. But so far we've been able to take tickets, support people, and get things done.
Yeah, almost business as usual for us.
Almost.
Yeah. Okay, what are the must-dos for an employer?
Yeah, I'm going to keep harping on it. We have to focus on communications. There should be clear expectations about things like work schedules, whatever flexibility is allowed as a part of it, and so on. We should know about when people are starting their days, when they're ending their days. I do think it's a good time to give people flexibility, especially if you work in a business. I know for us in IT, sometimes we might get calls later, so it might be good to have some flexibility. And people might want flexibility because they have to watch their kids during the day. I think those are good things to keep in mind, because we have to be realistic here about what we can do. You must define sensitive data and incident management policies. So if people need to know if they get phished or their computer is hacked right now, that they have to report it the right way. If they are dealing with sensitive data and they're not sure how to handle it, they have to handle it the right way. They should be very transparent about what home devices they're using to access company assets if they aren't already, and we should try and inventory them if we can. I mentioned it before, we should have personal check-ins that aren't always business. We should really focus on our people's well-being and keeping people not being stir crazy. I feel like the more we care about people, the more we do the right things for our people, the better they will be for us, and vice versa. People want to work, people want to be productive, but it's important that we do it in a secure way and that we communicate. The communication is really the number one thing.
Yeah, absolutely, makes sense. Okay, moving along into the hardware questions. How do I determine which piece of hardware to keep running while no one is in the office? For example, if I shut down the PCs, they won't be updated or get the virus scans. Is that okay?
It's okay in the sense that if the PC is powered off, no one can get into it. If it's powered on, then there's no connectivity to it. So no one's going to hack it. No one's going to exploit these vulnerabilities. But what it does mean is when you boot this idle machine back up, let's say that machine's sitting for the next 8 weeks, and you come in and you boot it up, don't just go right to work and, oh, you know what, I got to send all this stuff off. Let me just do it. Let the machine do some updates. You might have to take some time for the machine to reboot a few times, go through its update cycle, grab its patches, grab its virus definitions, run a virus scan, all this other stuff. Then you might normally, where you may barely notice these sort of service interruptions to do maintenance. So if you think the PC can shut down and you don't need it to work remotely, feel free to shut it down, save the power, and don't worry about it for now.
Okay, great. when a computer is idle and we are working from home, how do you wake up the computer so that you can log into your work computer?
Yeah. So in terms of actual sleeping computers, and when I say sleeping, I mean a machine that is powered on, it has not lost power, it has not lost network connectivity, it's just needs to be woken up. First of all, it has to be on the configuration side in advance. So if the machine is completely asleep and is not, you can't talk to it, it's not like I can remote in the machine and make it wake up. But if the machine is in more of an idle state where it's locked and no one can get into it, but it is connected technically to the internet, you should be able to just wake it up and we can help you configure that sort of thing. There are things for servers that are cards, like HP has something called integrated lights out, which is like a little card that actually will power on a machine that's powered off. I don't believe they're on most desktops or laptops. You might be able to find ones that have that sort of thing. One thing I do want to say is as we move into the future, the idea of I'm going to go from my home PC to remote to my desktop at work, which then gets my servers or my cloud stuff or whatever, is probably not the way things are going to be in the future. You're going to either have software as a service things that are sort of device independent, so it doesn't matter that you're not using your home machine anymore, you're not using your work machine anymore, and instead you're using your home machine because the home machine can just go to the site and grab the stuff. You're going to see more stuff like that. Or you're going to see cloud services where you remote directly into the asset, or like a Windows virtual desktop. So like a Windows virtual desktop, you're going into Microsoft's cloud and you're booting up a Windows 10 desktop virtually, and you're just using your keyboard and mouse on whatever device you're using to interact with it. But the device itself is not really that important. That's probably where we're going to see in the future. Obviously, right now we're doing what we're doing and what we have access to.
Okay, great. And along those lines, laptops versus desktops for remote work.
Really makes no difference. Really about how you want to work and what power you need. You know, obviously laptops, desktops tend to give you more power for your money in exchange for, a lack of mobility and a lot of real estate. But it's sort of about how you want to work. Most business applications, really not a big deal. Right now, I'm doing this webinar. I'm on a Dell laptop. I have 2 desktop computers in my house, but I mostly use them for playing computer games and doing fun stuff. I might use it to record a video because I have a nice mic and a webcam on one of them, so I might use that for video. Sometimes I think if you're doing that high-end video stuff, a desktop can often be better. It's just a better experience. But at the end of the day, especially now, it really comes down to personal preference. And in some respects, if the supply chain is an issue, what you can get, sometimes you might not be able to get the device you want, unfortunately, given supply chain concerns.
Right, I know we've seen that. We did have a question coming kind of related to the previous slide. Virtual desktop appears to be quite expensive. Are there any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think virtual desktop is not necessarily a solution for everyone. What I always say is the cost, you have to look at the cost versus benefit and what the total cost of ownership is. So if by adopting virtual desktop, I can go lean on the hardware that I have in the office, maybe that cost now doesn't seem all that bad. But really, I wouldn't recommend anyone get Windows Virtual Desktop offhand without actually having a discussion about what work needs to be accomplished and how, what systems you use, what data you use, where people are going to work, so on and so forth. Let's start with workflow. Where are my people working? What do they need to do to be successful? What do my clients need? How do I need to be secured? All that stuff. And then Windows Virtual Desktop might be the best investment for the money. It might not be. It might be that the solution is, you know what, instead of doing a Windows Virtual Desktop solution with that sort of apes what I did with a in-house server environment, I'm just going to buy SaaS products, things that I get from websites, and then but then you're going to pay subscription fees on the SaaS products. So you really have to look at what needs to be accomplished, go through the options, figure out what it takes for you to be successful, and then it's going to kind of dictate what technology you're going to use. It's not an easy question. It's really a process to make a good decision.
Right, right. Okay, moving along. Do you recommend laptops with a camera versus monitors with a webcam for purposes of conducting depositions and video conferencing with clients?
Yeah. The biggest problem with using a laptop with a webcam is the webcams and the laptops are basic. Now, I'm pretty happy. I'm looking at the camera now. I'm pretty happy with the quality here that we're getting, but you can see my face is a little washed out. It's a little oversaturated, I think. There's only so much I can do with it. My Logitech webcam that I have downstairs that I use, the quality is like really, really good. It's like a 4K camera. It does all this other stuff. It's beautiful. It cost me, I think, like 80 bucks, 100 bucks, something like that. And it's a really great camera. And the other thing is, if you use a dedicated camera, there are, directorial things, if you will. So like I can put my camera up in the corner and stand far away from it, or I can use a little microphone on my, like I can clip on a microphone and do stuff like that. And so depending on what you're trying to do, I mean, you can see that we're having a perfectly decent conversation using cheap tools that are built into a standard Dell laptop, and it's totally fine. But if I really want high fidelity, if I'm worried about my viewing angles and stuff like that, you might need to get better camera equipment and get a little more creative. Even if you're using a laptop, like let's say you're using a laptop to record, you might not use the webcam on here. You might get another webcam and wire it USB and hook it up somewhere else just so you can get a better view. You can do that sort of thing.
Okay, good to know. All right, now we're going to move into security questions, security-related questions. Please share best practices to give employees who are new to working remotely on keeping their data safe and secure. That's a good one.
I wrote a bunch of things here. There are so many things we can go over, but here are the key ones that I came up with. They need to be aware of what it is and is not allowed with company data and devices and software. So we have to define acceptable use. This is what we expect of you. This is what you need to do, and it has to be defined really in writing. We should be identifying the use of bring your own device stuff and define what sensitive data is. We shouldn't allow family members or other people in the home to work in the same ecosystem as the company's work. What I mean by that is, if I'm working on this laptop, this is a company laptop, and I don't have any kids around or anything like that, but let's say I had a kid around, I really shouldn't say to that kid, oh, you know what, I'm going to take a lunch break, go ahead and play a game on it, or go to a website on it, or watch this. I shouldn't do that. That's something that shouldn't be allowed. Make sure they're aware of the incident response policy and how to report. Make sure whether they're using a home PC or a company owned PC, that all the maintenance processes like updating, doing Windows updates, doing virus scans, so on and so forth, make sure all that stuff is still allowed to happen. Let them know that if the machine says it needs to reboot, let the machine reboot. We have to let this stuff go forward so that our machines are still patched. We're not going to have hands on them as much as we normally would. If it's a home PC, make sure there's some kind of mechanism in place to patch and update it, scan for viruses, malware, make sure that the person knows. If the person doesn't know how to do that stuff, this is a good time to have a conversation. Maybe we can work with them on it, something like that. But I think it's important we still do that kind of basic maintenance. Whenever possible, you should utilize multi-factor authentication to access sensitive accounts. So if you're using, for example, Microsoft Office 365, there really should be multi-factor authentication on that. If you're doing other things that are sensitive, if the option is available, utilize multi-factor authentication. Getting back to the sensitive data thing, we need to make sure that we use encrypted measures to send and receive that stuff. And if you don't know how, it's a good time to ask a very personal question about it.
Right, absolutely. All right, everybody, we have about, I think, 2 more questions. So just to give you guys an idea of where we're at. With employees working from home and using different providers with various levels of security on their Wi-Fi connections, what steps can be taken to keep our network secure?
Yeah, so we don't we don't control these home environments. We don't know everything about what router somebody is using. So it's really difficult to know what's going on with someone's personal Wi-Fi. The first thing we can do is we can use VPN and other encryption tools so that data is encrypted in transit even on local Wi-Fi. So let's say I have a crappy Wi-Fi in my home and I am trying to send data offsite, and if I'm using a VPN, at least I know that the data I'm sending from from the source to the destination is wrapped in an encryption layer. So even if someone connected to my personal Wi-Fi that shouldn't be, they can't read what I'm sending. I think that's really helpful. We should tell people, though, that we expect them to create password-protected personal wireless networks in their home. And frankly, if they're able to build Wi-Fi in their homes, I live in a townhouse here, and I have personal Wi-Fi, and I have it encrypted and secured so that only I can access it. They can have it password protected. If they're not sure, there are a lot of people who can help get their home Wi-Fi set up in a basic way, where it is private. The other thing is follow process. So if people are going to be using their home networks, we really need to make sure they're still using company channels and stuff like that. We can't have people downloading company data to another laptop that they own just because I like working on my personal laptop better. So I took the dock, I put it on my personal laptop, I worked on it, then I put it back on the work laptop, and I said, people have to follow process. If the company laptop's there for them to work, that's the device they work on, not their home machine. They have to follow the process. It's going to be challenging, but the most important, and I mentioned the multi-factor authentication, if we're using the right tools around it, then those sorts of factors aren't as big of a deal.
Right. Okay, great. And then I believe this is our last official question. It's a good one. What types of cybersecurity threats should we be aware of?
All of them. No, just kidding. There's a ton of threats out there, but today, April 2nd, 2020, the biggest thing I'm concerned about are things like phishing and credential theft. There are so many COVID-19 scams, so many of these emails that are going out, and people are very vulnerable to it. I've been running phishing tests on our clients that have phishing service that have themes regarding COVID-19, and my hit rates are way up because people are looking for information and bad guys know it. Like, I'm definitely catching more people on phishing tests when I theme them around COVID-19 right now. It just shows how uncertain it is and why it's such a vulnerable area for people to attack right now with phishing. So related to that, I think the stimulus scams are going to be next. So just get ready to see emails saying, hey, click here to find out when your stimulus check is coming, or click here to find out about this SBA loan forgiveness program or stuff like that. Like, there's going to be so many scams like that. It's going to be ridiculous. I remember when TARP happened, there were all kinds of mortgage-related scams in 2008, and I expect to see more of that stuff. We should also be careful about who we share information with. There could be a compromised email account, and someone says, "Send me all these files via email," and you may think it's who you think it is, but it turns out it's a hacker. So we have to be very, very careful about who we share information with, more vigilant than normal. The last thing, and I'm going to bring this one up, is social media. A lot of people want to post all sorts of things about their coronavirus experience, or the thing I see now that drives me nuts is these people who share these like chain things, and it says, hey, share this link and talk about write out the third application or this or that, and it's just basically, this is a fun game where we just go around and we say something random and we laugh at what the thing is. Well, but the thing is, some of this random stuff that you're giving away, or these pictures that you're showing, show sensitive stuff in it, and we shouldn't be giving people those things that could be the answers to our security questions on our accounts. So, when you have a bank account, it might say, give us a security question. What was your model of your first car, or what's your mother's maiden name, or whatever these security questions are. People are doing these chain sort of posts, and they share it with your friends, or post your comments here. And I think to myself, it's just an information farm for people to take stuff from. So I'd be very careful on social media right now. A lot of bad information is out there. Matter of fact, I'm going to spoil what Jill has coming up. we're going to talk about some of this stuff in our webinar later this month, where we talk about phishing and deepfakes and scams and stuff like that, because I think it's really important to talk about how to know what to trust when working online. We're really swimming with the sharks right now when it comes to this internet stuff, and it's going to be very important that we're all skeptical, that we all are careful about what we're doing.
Yep, absolutely. That was our last official question. Again, if you guys have any other questions, you can use the question box to fill them in. Give something. Yeah, in the meantime, we have put up here some just additional resources that we've posted. Our blog is chock full of tips and links to help you navigate these waters. Got a couple blog articles out there that I think you'll find useful. And I've also included links to our blog. And as Ben said, our next webinar, phishing, deepfakes, and how to trust online information, you can go to our website right now and sign up for that. We'll be adding more details to that soon. Also, I did get the question, this webinar will be recorded and it's going to be posted on our website a little bit later today.
Right.
We're also going to be making a blog version of it, just so that it's something you can actually read if you don't want to watch the video. So that'll be looked for our website later today.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody for submitting the questions. It was really, really good. I did not expect the level of response we got in terms of registrants and number of questions, and I really appreciate it. I mean, it makes, I want to help you with the things that you need and not just guess. So it's really helpful for us, and I'd like to, and Jill and I are already talking about what else can we do like this format and do more stuff. So if anybody wants to see other content like this, more collaborative stuff, we're very open to it.
Yep, there'll be a survey when you guys log out of the webinar, so just type in your feedback there. If there's anything that you want to see that we can provide, we're here to help you guys during this time.
Yep. Did we get anything else? As I know you got one as we went through. Did we get any other comments or questions?
Yes, we did get one other question related to an earlier topic, so I'll read that out. Do you think Microsoft will allow for multiple windows in the future? Makes me crazy jumping from a full screen audio call to respond to a chat. It would be awesome to be able to open up multiple windows for multitasking.
Well, I mean, so there's technically something right now in Windows 10. You know, I don't know of this user's setup, but in Windows 10, with most applications, you can do this like side lock thing. So I forget what, I think it's called Snap. I forget what the feature is called. But like, let's say for the sake of argument, you've got a Word document open that you're typing in and a chat in the other window. Maybe it's a Teams conversation or a chat or some kind, and then you've got your Word document on the other side. If you click on the window, and I'm going to do it as I'm talking here on my notes, and you drag it all the way to the left or the right, and you reach the side of the screen, you'll see like a little silhouette that shows the window kind of covering half of that side of the screen, and then you let go. The application locks to that side of the screen, and then you can pick the other application for the other side of the screen. So just for the sake of argument, what I just did is I put a Teams conversation that Jill and I have on the right, and then I put my notes on the left, and I can chat with Jill and then work on my document and go back and forth. Now they're smaller windows, but that's something you can do right now. It's called Snap. I think it's called Snap. You'll have to forgive me. I haven't looked up the name of the feature in a while. But it's really cool. I use it all the time. I mean, obviously, you have multiple monitors. That's the best thing because you can have a monitor with this and a monitor with that. You can have your whole battle station with all that stuff in it. I know some people hate that amount of technology, but I like it. But if you don't have that, the Snap feature is pretty nice.
Oh, cool. Good to know.
Yeah.
And if Karen Shell, our president, is chiming in. If you guys need help, call.
We better answer. And the webinar's over.
No, we just want to remind you we are here for you. Our service desk is chugging along. They are available 24/7. Give them a call if you need anything. We're banging them out.
Yes. Thank you very much, Karen. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. All right. I think that wraps everything up. So as I said, I will be emailing everybody a link to the recording. Look for our blog, the blog version of this webinar later today, and sign up for our next webinar on April 29th. Ben, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
No, just thanks to everybody for participating and showing up, and I hope it was helpful. And please, it's a very uncertain time right now. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions. We're here to help. Please don't hesitate. Shoot me an email. I'm happy to talk with you. I am not going anywhere.
Absolutely.
So feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help. I really am.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Signing
Thank
off.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.